They say dragons died with fire and fury. But Sarah had learned the hardest death was the slow one, the kind where you carved away pieces of yourself until nothing remained but the hollow shape of what you'd been. 10 years, 3,650 mornings of standing before a polished brass mirror in the stables of Iron Peak Castle, running her fingers over the flat, scarred spaces where her horns had been. The stumps ached in winter, phantom pain from limbs that would never grow back. She had been 19 when she'd sawed them off herself. Just another refugee fleeing the dragon hunts, seeking work mucking stalls in exchange for a corner to sleep in and bread to eat. No one questioned a girl with calloused hands and a willingness to shovel manure before dawn. No one suspected that beneath her sun-darkened skin lived something ancient, something that had once ruled the skies before humans learned to forge dragon-killing steel and speak prayers to their new gods. Now at 29, or whatever age meant to something like her, Sarah stood in the pre-dawn darkness of the vast stables, brushing down horses with the methodical rhythm that had become her meditation. The other stable hands called her lucky, a cruel irony that made her grind her teeth until they bled human red. Lucky because she'd survived when entire flights had been slaughtered. Lucky because she worked in the castle while others starved in the streets. If only they knew she was the very creature their ballads celebrated killing, the last of the skyborn, beings of living flame who once commanded storms and spoke to stars. The stable door crashed open, bringing autumn wind and chaos. The king returns. Marcus, the stable master, bellowed. 2 weeks early from the Eastern Territories. Sarah's brush stilled against the mare's flank. King Varden Stormclaw, the alpha who had claimed his throne 7 years ago when his brother died in battle. The same alpha whose wolf could supposedly scent magic from 5 leagues away, whose eyes, gray as winter storms, pierced through every illusion and pretense. She had managed to avoid him for 7 years, keeping to the stables during royal functions, vanishing into the servant quarters whenever his presence filled the castle like smoke from a wildfire. But sometimes in the deep of night, she felt him. A pull like gravity, like falling, like every choice she'd ever run from calling her home. The other stable hands erupted into motion, but Sarah remained frozen, hay dust coating her arms like ash, because she could feel it now. His presence approaching the castle like a storm rolling in from the mountains. Her dragon nature stirred beneath her human mask, recognizing something in him that terrified her more than any hunter's blade or priest's holy fire. Lucky, Marcus snapped. Stop dreaming. We need the king's war horse ready for inspection. She forced herself to move, but her hands trembled. Today felt different. The air itself held its breath. Strange signs have been appearing lately. Children in the market whose eyes held flecks of gold, smoke that rose in spiral patterns, steel weapons that sometimes grew warm without fire. As she worked, memories surfaced unbidden. Her mother's scales shattering under enchanted arrows. Her sister's death scream as dragon-killing steel pierced her heart. The night she learned to compress her infinite nature into finite flesh, to breathe without flame, to walk without wings, to live without sky. The weight of being the last, the only, the survivor who lived by becoming everything her people were not. By the time the sun crested the mountains, painting Iron Peak's gray stone walls gold, the stables buzzed with preparations. Sarah had just finished saddling the king's massive destrier when she heard it. Footsteps in the corridor beyond. Not the hurried scramble of servants or the measured pace of guards, but something else. Deliberate. Predatory. The footsteps stopped directly outside the stable door. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to shift into smoke and shadow and flee this place forever. But she couldn't. Her human disguise held her like chains, and beneath it, her dragon nature writhed in recognition of what stood beyond that door. The handle turned. King Varden Stormclaw stepped inside, and the stables fell silent as death. He was exactly as the stories claimed, tall enough to dwarf most men, shoulders broad as mountain ranges, with hair the color of steel and a face carved from granite and storm. But it was his eyes that stopped hearts, deep gray with flecks of amber, holding the weight of every secret ever whispered in darkness. Those eyes swept the stables, past cowering servants and restless horses, past everything and everyone until they found her, and stopped. The world narrowed to that singular moment. The Alpha King staring at a hay-covered stable girl, while something primal and undeniable stirred in the space between them. For 10 eternal seconds, neither moved. The stables held their breath while Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Too fast, too hard, too human. She forced herself to bow with the others, keeping her eyes fixed on the hay-strewn floor where dust had mixed with her footprints to create small clouds of gold. "Your Majesty," Marcus stammered. "We weren't expecting. Forgive us. The morning preparations. Continue your work." The king's voice rolled through the room like distant thunder, deep enough to shake foundations. "I came to inspect the horses personally." Lies. Even Sarah, trapped in her human shell, could taste the deception. Alpha Kings didn't inspect stables at dawn. They had stable masters for that, whole hierarchies of servants to ensure their horses were fed and their tack properly maintained. She kept her head down, hands mechanically adjusting stirrups while every nerve screamed warnings. Through her peripheral vision, she watched his boots, black leather worn from battle, moving between the stalls. He paused at each horse, running his hands over their flanks, asking questions about breeding and temperament that no king should know or care about. He was circling her like a wolf stalking prey through underbrush. "And who handled my destrier?" His boots stopped directly in front of her stall. "Lucky, Your Majesty," Marcus answered quickly. "Been with us nearly 10 years now. Best hand with difficult horses in the kingdom." Lucky. The king tasted the name like wine, rolling it around his mouth. "Look at me. It wasn't an alpha command. Those held power that could force even the strongest will to bend. This was softer, more dangerous. A request that sounded like destiny calling." Sarah raised her head slowly, carefully, keeping her expression blank as their eyes met. The impact was instantaneous. Something electric crackled between them, invisible lightning that made every horse in the stable whinny nervously. His pupils dilated, gray consuming amber until his eyes looked like portals to storm clouds. She saw the exact moment his wolf rose to the surface, a flash of gold in the darkness before vanishing. "Interesting," he murmured, tilting his head as if solving a puzzle. "Tell me, Lucky, where are you from originally?" "The mountain villages, Your Majesty." The lie came smooth as silk, practiced thousands of times. "My family died in the dragon fires 10 years ago." The dragon fires. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Yes, many were lost during that purge." He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew she was lying. She could see it in the predatory stillness of his stance, the way his nostrils flared slightly, as if sensing something beneath her human disguise. But he didn't call her out, didn't demand truth. Instead, he reached for her hand, examining the calluses from years of stable work. His fingers brushed her palm, and where they touched, she felt heat. Not human warmth, but something deeper, familiar. The contact lasted less than a heartbeat, but it sent fire racing through her veins. Her dragon nature surged against its bonds, desperate to answer whatever had just called to it through his touch. She jerked back, and for one horrifying moment, she felt her disguise flicker. Smoke rose from her skin, too thin, too gray, like looking at breath in winter air. The temperature around her spiked with heat that had nothing to do with the autumn morning. The king's eyes widened fractionally. "Forgive me, your majesty," she gasped, dropping to her knees, genuinely terrified. "I'm clumsy. Rise." The command was gentle, but absolute. She stood on shaking legs as he studied her with an intensity that could strip paint from walls. "You'll serve at tonight's feast," he said, "in the great hall." "But your majesty," Marcus interjected, "Lucky works in the stables, not the—" "Tonight, she serves." His tone brooked no argument. Then to her specifically were something fitting for the hall. "You'll pour wine at the high table." The high table, where she'd be exposed to every noble, every advisor, every person who might notice something amiss. Where she'd have to stand for hours under the scrutiny of beings who hunted her kind for sport. But worse than that, where she'd be near him. One more thing. The king turned at the doorway, his gray gaze finding hers across the chaos of the stables. "The heat around you, Lucky. You might want to tend to it." Her blood turned to ice. She glanced down to find the hay at her feet smoldering, tiny wisps of smoke rising where her anxiety had manifested as temperature. It had been happening more frequently lately, as if her disguise was weakening after a decade of constant use. When she looked up again, he was gone, leaving only the echo of his presence and the terrible certainty that her decade of hiding had just ended. The great hall transformed at sunset, 1,000 torches casting dancing shadows across stone walls that had witnessed centuries of secrets. Sarah stood in borrowed servant attire, a deep green dress that actually fit, unlike her usual shapeless stable garb, trying to calm the fire beneath her skin. "Remember, Helena," the head serving woman whispered harshly. "Pour from the right. Never speak unless addressed. And whatever you do, don't look the nobles in the eye." If only it were that simple. The doors opened, and the nobility of Iron Peak flooded in like a tide of silk and ambition. Sarah recognized some from her years of hiding. Lord Brennan, with his perpetual sneer. Lady Cordelia, whose husband had died under mysterious circumstances. And dozens more who played politics like bloodsport. Then came the announcement that made her bones ache. His Majesty King Varden Stormclaw, an honored guest, High Inquisitor Matthias of the Dragon Slayer Order. Sarah's breath caught. The Dragon Slayer Order. The very organization that had led the Purge, who wore her people's horns and scales as trophies. And their High Inquisitor himself, young for such a position at perhaps 35 years, with close-cropped black hair and eyes like chips of obsidian. Matthias glided in wearing robes of deep crimson, dragon-scale armor visible beneath, both decoration and weapon. At his throat hung a pendant that made Sarah's dragon nature recoil. A dragon horn, carved and polished, still faintly pulsing with trapped magic. The king entered beside him, dressed in gray that absorbed light like storm clouds. His eyes found Sarah immediately, tracking her as she took her position behind the high table. "Your Majesty," Matthias said smoothly, settling into the seat of honor. "I'm grateful for this welcome. The Order has much to discuss regarding recent disturbances." "Disturbances?" Varden's voice held polite interest, though his gaze never left Sarah. "Magical signatures in the borderlands. Signs that perhaps not all the dragons perished in the Purge." He smiled, cold as winter frost. "We suspect at least one survivor walks among us, hidden behind human guise. There have been anomalies. Children born with gold-flecked eyes. Smoke that rises in strange patterns. Steel that grows warm without fire. Sarah's hand trembled as she poured wine, a single drop splashing onto the white tablecloth like blood on snow. So others had noticed the signs she'd been seeing. Careful, the Inquisitor said, those obsidian eyes suddenly fixed on her. Nervous hands often indicate guilty conscience. Leave the girl be, Varden commanded softly. She's unused to serving the high table. Of course. Matthias's smile sharpened. Though I must say, Your Majesty, your servants have an unusual warmth about them. The meal progressed with agonizing slowness. Every time Sarah approached to refill glasses, she felt Matthias watching, evaluating, hunting. The pendant at the Inquisitor's throat grew warmer whenever she drew near, its trapped magic crying out to its own kind. Halfway through the second course, disaster struck. Lord Brennan, deep in his cups, grabbed Sarah's wrist as she poured. Pretty thing, aren't you? Perhaps the king would share. The rage came instantly, involuntarily. Her dragon nature surged against its bonds, and for a split second, her skin flickered. Human flesh becoming translucent, revealing scales beneath. Gold scales that caught torchlight like treasure. Brennan jerked back with a cry. Her arm. Did you see? You're drunk, Varden said flatly, his alpha command rippling through the words. You saw nothing but wine shadows. Apologize to the girl and retire. The Lord's mouth moved soundlessly, fighting the command before he mumbled an apology and stumbled from the hall. But Matthias had seen. His eyes gleamed with predatory triumph. How fascinating, he murmured, rising gracefully. Your Majesty, might I perform a small demonstration? The Order has developed new methods for detecting hidden creatures. Before Varden could respond, he pulled out a vial of clear liquid. Holy water mixed with dragon's bane, Sarah realized with horror. The Inquisitor began splashing it on nearby servants, who merely looked confused as the water harmlessly dampened their clothes. You see, harmless to humans, Matthias said, approaching Sarah with deliberate steps. But to a dragon. Sarah backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The Inquisitor raised the vial, and time seemed to slow. The water arced through the air, catching torchlight like falling stars. A hand shot out, catching the water before it could touch her. Varden stood between them, the holy water sizzling against his palm, burning his skin with a sound like meat on hot coals. The hall gasped collectively. Your Majesty, Matthias stepped forward. You're injured. You forget yourself, Inquisitor. His voice could have frozen flame. No one threatens what is mine. The possessive claim rang through the hall like a bell toll. Mine, an alpha's claim, witnessed by hundreds. Matthias's eyes narrowed. She's not human, Your Majesty. Surely you can sense. I sense that you've overstayed your welcome. Guards, escort the Inquisitor to his chambers to prepare for departure. He will remain as our guest until certain matters are resolved. As guards surrounded him, Matthias's gaze locked on Sarah with naked hatred. The Order knows what you are, abomination. We've been hunting your kind for 10 years, and we won't stop now. The palace corridor stretched endless and empty, lit only by moonlight streaming through tall windows. Sarah ran, her borrowed dress tangling around her legs, her human disguise fracturing with every step. Behind her, she could hear pursuit. Not guards, but something else. A presence that made her bones sing and her dragon nature claw at its prison. She burst through a door and found herself in the palace's ancient armory. Weapons gleaming in silver moonbeams, her reflection in polished shields showing the truth. Her disguise failing. Human features flickering between flesh and scales. Stop running. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Varden emerged from shadows like he'd been born from them, his burned hand already healing. Something she hadn't known alpha wolves could do. The air between them crackled with unspoken truths and dangerous possibilities. "You knew," she gasped, pressing herself against the weapon racks. "From the moment you walked into the stables. You knew." "I suspected." He moved closer with predator grace. "Your heat signature, your scent, the way reality seems to bend around you like air above flame. But it wasn't until tonight, until I felt the bond, that I knew for certain. There is no bond." The denial came desperate, automatic. "Dragons don't have mates. We don't. We can't." "Lie to yourself if you must," he said softly, now close enough that she could see amber fracturing through his gray eyes. "But don't lie to me. I felt you for years, Lucky. Or should I say Sarah?" Her true name on his lips shattered something inside her. The disguise collapsed entirely. Heat exploded from her skin, not harsh, but liquid, like sunlight given form. Golden scales emerged along her arms and neck, iridescent in the moonlight. Her eyes became molten gold, containing fire. Small horns, barely more than bumps where the originals had been sawed away, pressed against her skin from within, trying desperately to emerge. She stood before him as she was now. Not fully dragon, not fully human, but something broken in between. The last Skyborn, a being of living flame trapped in a form that was almost but not quite complete. Varden didn't step back. Instead, he reached out, his fingers hovering inches from her scaled cheek. "Beautiful," he breathed. "I'm mutilated," she whispered, touching the flat spaces where her horns should be. "Your people hunt mine. The Inquisitor will return with an army. Every moment I remain here puts you in danger. I've been in danger since the day I took the throne." His hand finally made contact, and where his skin met her scales, warmth danced. "My brother didn't die in battle, Sarah. He was murdered by those who wanted a different king. A weaker one they could control." The confession hung between them. She saw the weight he carried, the loneliness of a throne built on blood and betrayal. "Why did you protect me?" she asked. "Because my wolf recognized you before my mind did." His other hand came up, framing her face. "Because for 7 years I felt this pull toward the stables, toward a servant who somehow made my wolf howl for its mate. Because you're not the only one hiding your true nature." Before she could ask what he meant, he began to change. Not the fluid shift of a normal werewolf, but something primal and wrong. His bones broke and reformed. His skin rippled with fur that seemed to absorb light. When the transformation ended, a massive wolf stood before her, but its form was wrong. Too large, too powerful, its presence too otherworldly. "Cursed," he said, his voice strange coming from lupin jaws. "My bloodline carries the curse of the ancient wolves, the ones who existed before the moon goddess bound them. We're neither fully human nor fully wolf. We heal from wounds that should kill us. But holy water and dragon's bane burn us as they burn you. Monsters, just like the dragons." Understanding crashed over her. "That's why you can resist alpha commands from other wolves. Why the holy water burned you. You're not purely werewolf. You're something older." He shifted back, the healing ability now making sense. It wasn't wolf magic, but something more ancient. "We're both remnants of the old world, Sarah. Perhaps that's why fate bound us together. The Inquisitor is being watched," he continued. "But first, you need to tell me everything. Why you're here, why you've been hiding, what you're really running from." Sarah looked at this impossible alpha, this cursed king who'd claimed her before hundreds of witnesses, who stood between her and holy water, who showed her his monstrous truth without fear. "My horns," she began, her form flickering between human and dragon as emotions surged. "I didn't lose them in battle. I cut them off myself. Dragon horns are our connection to our magic to our ability to fly, to transform fully. Without them, I'm trapped like this, half-formed, incomplete. She touched the scarred stumps beneath her skin. I came here because I heard the castle's ancient wards could work both ways. Not just keeping magic out, but hiding it within. I thought if I stayed small, stayed hidden, I could survive. But I was wrong. Glass shattered. Through the broken window came creatures of living shadow, their forms writhing with corrupted magic. At their center descended a dragon, but wrong. Twisted. Its scales were black as void, its eyes burning red instead of gold. Where it breathed, corruption spread. "Hello, little sister," the dragon said, voice like breaking stone. "Time to come home." Sarah's world tilted. "Kieran? You died. I saw you fall." "I survived," her brother hissed. "And I learned the truth. The humans didn't kill us because we were dangerous. They killed us because we were powerful. So I made myself dangerous. I embraced what they feared." The shadow creatures lunged simultaneously, their forms spreading across the armory like spilled ink. Ancient weapons crumbled at their touch, centuries of steel dissolving into rust. Sarah's heat flared instinctively, creating a barrier that made them recoil with shrieks. Protective of your pet wolf, Kieran descended closer, a perversion of what dragons should be. Where Sarah glowed gold and warm, Kieran blazed with stolen darkness. "How disappointing. I raise you to be apex, not prey." "You didn't raise me," Sarah spat back, her form solidifying with anger. "You abandoned me when I needed you most." Varden moved to stand beside her, his cursed wolf rippling just beneath his skin. "You must be the disturbances Matthias mentioned." Kieran's laugh was like shattering stone. "The little inquisitor. He's been useful, following my trail, giving me enemies to corrupt, though he doesn't know it yet. His attention fixed on Varden with predatory interest. And what are you? Not quite wolf, not quite human. How delicious." "Get behind me," Varden commanded, but Sarah grabbed his arm. "No, he's here for me. This is my fight." "Our fight," he corrected. And before she could protest, he partially shifted. Not full wolf, but something between, retaining human shape while gaining wolf attributes. His burned hand completed its healing, claws extending, eyes blazing gold. "You claimed me as yours when you protected me. I claimed you as mine when I stood between you and the holy water. That makes us pack." The word pack resonated with power older than kingdoms. Kieran's expression twisted. "Mate bonds. Such primitive magic." He gestured, and his shadow servants attacked again. The battle erupted in chaos. Varden fought like something from nightmares. Too fast, too strong, tearing through shadows with claws that shouldn't exist. But for every shadow destroyed, two more formed from the spreading darkness. Sarah's heat began to falter. 10 years without her horns had weakened her, made her magic sluggish. She watched in horror as one shadow slipped past her failing barrier, heading straight for Varden's exposed back. "No!" She moved without thinking, throwing herself between them. The shadow's claws raked across her shoulder, tearing through scales like paper. She screamed, not in human voice, but in harmonics that shattered every remaining window. Golden blood sprayed across ancient stone. Where it landed, flowers bloomed impossibly. Fire lilies unfurling in seconds, their warmth pushing back the darkness. The sign she'd been seeing, children with gold-flecked eyes, warm steel, suddenly made sense. Her essence had been slowly leaking into the world, seeding it with dragon magic. "Sarah!" Varden caught her as she fell, and something primal snapped inside him. The curse he'd controlled his entire life erupted outward. His form expanded, twisted, became something that belonged in humanity's oldest nightmares. Not wolf, not man, but the thing that spawned both. 12 feet of muscle and shadow. Eyes like molten gold. Jaws filled with teeth that could crack mountains. The first wolf. The original monster. Even Kieran stepped back. With a roar that shook the palace foundations, Varden attacked. Not with strategy or skill, but with primordial rage. He tore through shadows like tissue, his very presence making reality buckle. But Kieran had lived 10 years feeding on corruption. As Varden charged him directly, the dragon smiled and spoke a single word in the old tongue. Stop! The command hit him like a physical wall. Not an alpha command, but something older. The same magic that had once bound the first wolves, forcing them to submit to the moon goddess. Varden crashed to his knees, his monstrous form fighting against invisible chains. Fascinating, Kieran mused, circling him. The curse responds to the original binding. You're not just a descendant of the first wolves. You are one, reborn into flesh. He traced a claw along Varden's jaw. I can make such use of you. Brother, Sarah struggled upright, golden blood still streaming. Please, take me. Leave him. Take you. Kieran laughed. Oh, sister, I don't need to take you. You're going to give yourself to me. He gestured, and more shadows grabbed Varden, spreading him between them like a sacrifice. His monstrous form began to shrink, the curse being forcibly suppressed, leaving him human and vulnerable. Here's your choice, Kieran said sweetly. Give me your remaining magic willingly. Let me drain what's left of your dragon essence, and I'll spare your mate. Refuse, and I'll make you watch while my shadows tear him apart piece by piece. Sarah looked at Varden, suspended between shadows, his eyes blazing defiance even as his body failed. She thought of 10 years running, 10 years hiding, 10 years of careful lies to survive. No more. You want my magic? She stood, her form blazing brighter despite her injury. Then take it. She walked toward her brother, each step leaving fire lilies blooming in her wake. But as she moved, she began to speak in the old tongue, not to Kieran, but to the castle itself, to the steel in its walls, to the ancient wards. The steel wards responded to Sarah's call. Ancient protections built into Iron Peak's foundation, suddenly revealing their dual nature. Designed centuries ago, not just to repel, but to contain, they awakened at a dragon's command, forming a cage of pure intention. Kieran realized the trap too late. What are you doing? Something I should have done 10 years ago. Sarah's form grew brighter, not with healthy light, but with the dangerous glow of a star about to supernova. Steel doesn't just hurt us, brother. In high enough concentration, it can force us back to our pure state. Formless, powerless essence without consciousness. You'll destroy yourself too. Yes. Sarah's voice held perfect calm. But at least I'll take you with me. The wards strengthened, steel energy pressing inward like a vice. Kieran's shadow servants dissolved, unable to maintain form under such pressure. The corrupted dragon himself began to flicker, his stolen power fighting against dissolution. You would die for him? Kieran gestured at Varden, still suspended but watching with desperate eyes. For a cursed mongrel who'll live maybe 60 years while you could exist for millennia? I've lived in fear for 10 years. I'd rather have one moment of love than another century of running. Sarah began to dissolve at the edges, her form unraveling into pure flame. The fire lilies throughout the room bloomed brighter, feeding on her dispersing essence. That's when Varden broke free, not through strength or his cursed form, but through something simpler. The mate bond. Sarah's impending dissolution sent agony through their connection, and his wolf responded with primal fury that shattered Kieran's weakening control. He crashed to the floor and immediately lunged, not at Kieran, But it's Sarah, wrapping his arms around her dissolving form. "Stop," he commanded. "Not as an alpha, but as her mate. You don't get to leave me. The wards can be redirected." He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt it. His wolf, his curse, the monstrous thing inside him reaching out. "You're not the only one who can sacrifice, little flame." She felt his intention through their bond, and horror flooded her. "No, you can't. My curse for your freedom." He smiled. It was beautiful and terrible. The first wolf's essence is older than your brother's corruption, older than steel wards. If I release it fully, it will change everything. Not destroying, but transforming. I won't let you. Then we do it together. His gold-flecked eyes blazed with certainty. Your flame, my darkness. Creation and destruction. Balance. Kieran screamed, realizing what they meant to do. He threw himself at them. No longer draconic, but monstrous. All pretense of grace gone. Sarah looked into Varden's eyes and saw forever. Together, she agreed. They released everything simultaneously. Sarah's dragon essence exploded outward in waves of pure creation. Heat that gave rather than took. Healing rather than destroying. The fire lily seeds that had been spreading throughout the kingdom for months suddenly bloomed everywhere, in every crack and corner where her essence had touched. Varden's curse erupted in response. Darkness that devoured. The primordial hunger of the first wolf unleashed without restraint. Where flame met darkness, impossible things happened. The steel wards didn't break. They transformed, becoming gold, then crystal, then something that had no name because it had never existed before. Throughout the palace, children who'd been born with gold-flecked eyes suddenly understood what they were. Not cursed, but evolved. Kieran's corrupted form, caught between creation and destruction, began to unravel. His stolen power returning not to its victims, but to the world itself, seeding it with new possibilities. "This is impossible," he shrieked as his form dissolved. "Dragons and wolves are opposite forces. You can't." "We're not opposites," Sarah said, her voice harmonizing with Varden's growl. "We're balance." The explosion of power should have destroyed them all, should have leveled the palace, shattered the mountain, rewritten the laws of nature. Instead, it reformed everything. Kieran's essence, purified of corruption, dispersed into the cosmic flow. The twisted hunger that had driven him finally ended. The steel wards throughout the palace transformed into something new, neither keeping magic out nor trapping it in, but channeling it, balancing it, making it part of the world's fabric. And at the center of the transformation, Sarah and Varden collapsed into each other. Forever changed. Sarah was still dragon, but no longer purely so. Threads of shadow wove through her golden scales. Varden's essence permanently entwined with hers. Where her horns had been sawed away, new growth emerged. Not the massive spiral she'd been born with, but something smaller, elegant, formed from a fusion of dragon flame and wolf shadow. Varden remained cursed, but differently. The first wolf no longer fought against his human side, but merged with it. His eyes held permanent flecks of gold among the gray, and shadows bent strangely around him. They were neither fully their original selves, nor completely transformed. They were something new, something balanced. Dawnlight crept through the shattered windows where their combined power had erupted. Impossible gardens bloomed. Fire lilies and shadow roses. Plants that shouldn't exist growing side by side. Footsteps pounded in the corridor. Guards burst in, weapons drawn, only to freeze at the sight before them. Their king holding a being of living flame while surrounded by impossible flora. Behind them came Matthias, dragon-scale armor rattling, ready for war. He stopped dead at the armory's threshold, his pendant, the dragon horn, suddenly blazing with warm light rather than cold death. The throne room of Iron Peak Castle had never seen anything like this. A trial where the accused stood proud while the accuser trembled. 3 days had passed since the armory's transformation, and word had spread through 7 kingdoms. The last dragon lived. The Alpha King had claimed her, and somehow their union had changed the very nature of magic itself. Matthias stood before the assembled court, his crimson robes now seeming dim compared to Sarah's natural luminescence. Throughout the crowd, children who'd been born in the past decade watched with gold-flecked eyes, finally understanding the strange dreams they'd been having. The moments when shadows seemed friendly, when steel felt warm. "She is an abomination," Matthias declared, though his voice lacked conviction. "We're dangerous," Varden corrected from his throne, Sarah standing beside him, their hands entwined. "When isolated, when corrupted by fear, just as wolves were dangerous before the moon goddess balanced them. You speak heresy. I speak evolution." Varden rose, shadows crowning him like a living mantle, while Sarah's flame made them deeper, richer. "Show them love." Sarah stepped forward, her form shifting fluidly between human and dragon. She approached Matthias and touched the pendant at the Inquisitor's throat. The horn blazed alive, not with trapped agony, but with joy. The magic inside, freed by Sarah's touch, spiraled upward in ribbons of light that painted stories across the throne room ceiling. Memories of dragons who had lived, loved, and died. And more, visions of them joining with the world itself, their essence spreading like seeds. "They never truly died," Sarah said softly. "When my kind were killed, our essence didn't vanish. It dispersed, seeded itself into the next generation. Every child born since carries a fragment of what we were." The pendant crumbled to dust, but instead of looking diminished, Matthias stood stunned. Where the horn had rested against his skin, golden marks appeared. Not burns, but blessing marks. The prophecies, he whispered. The convergence. When all magical races would become one. We thought it meant domination, but it meant unity. Your steel weapons, our dragon flame, wolf curses, human adaptability, Sarah finished. All parts of a greater whole. A commotion at the door interrupted them. Guards dragged in a merchant, but changed. His skin bore unstable dragon shimmer, his form flickering wrongly, smoke rising from his trembling hands. He tried to steal magic from one of the gifted children, a guard reported. The merchant snarled, lunging at Sarah desperately. Varden moved to intercept, but Sarah raised her hand, stopping him. Instead of defending, she opened her arms. The merchant crashed into her and passed through, his corrupted form unable to hold against pure acceptance. He collapsed, human again, shaking. "Power taken by force corrupts," Sarah said, helping him stand. "Power given freely transforms." She placed her hand on the merchant's forehead, and a small portion of her flame passed to him. Not enough to change his nature, but enough to show him what he could become with patience and acceptance. Varden raised his hand for silence. From this day forward, Iron Peak Castle opens its doors to all. Human, wolf, and whatever new forms emerge. We'll teach balance, not segregation. "And the Dragon Slayer Order?" Matthias asked. "Becomes the Order of Balance," Sarah suggested. "Protectors, not hunters." Matthias looked at the golden marks on his chest, then at the children throughout the room, beginning to understand their dual nature. "I accept." 3 months later, the transformation was complete. Iron Peak had become a beacon. The gardens where fire lilies grew alongside shadow roses became a pilgrimage site. Children who showed signs of dragon gifts came to learn control. Wolves who struggled with their curses found peace in Varden's teachings. Sarah stood on the palace's highest tower, watching the sunset. She no longer needed to hide. Her form shifted freely between human and dragon as her mood dictated. Her new horns, smaller but more beautiful than the originals, caught the dying light like jewels. Arms wrapped around her from behind. Solid. Warm. Familiar. Regrets. Varden asked, "How could I regret this?" She turned in his arms. "I spent 10 years pretending to be human, only to discover humanity was pretending too. Everyone hiding their true nature. And now we're all becoming what we were meant to be. Beautifully mixed, impossibly balanced." He kissed her then, and where their lips met, flame and shadow danced. Across the kingdom, every magical being felt it. The mate bond that had become something more. A promise. A future. In the gardens below, a child laughed. Born human, but touched with dragon flame. Carrying wolf strength, but shaped by steel's discipline. The first of a new generation that would know no division between races. "Your Majesties." Helena appeared at the tower entrance. "The delegation from the Western Kingdoms has arrived." As they descended together, neither hiding their nature, Sarah reflected on her journey. 10 years she'd pretended to be human, carving away pieces of herself to survive, only to discover that everyone had been doing the same, hiding their full selves out of fear. But when the Alpha King had marked her as his, he'd broken the chains that kept all of them hiding. The age of hiding was over. The age of balance had begun. And in Iron Peak Castle, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds ruled not with power, but with acceptance. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in hiding what makes us different. It's in revealing it to those who see us for who we truly are. Sometimes the fiercest monsters become the gentlest protectors. And sometimes the last of a dying race discovers she was never truly alone. She was just waiting for the world to catch up.